Hi, I'm Sandra Razielli, coming to you from the beautiful Oakland Yoga Studio in Oakland, California. And today I wanted to talk a little bit about how we bend and how we sit, and wondering if you came to yoga class and your teacher was sitting like this, you might think twice about staying. So I need to acknowledge that for many people it's very hard to sit on the floor because it's hard to move the pelvis. It's even harder for people to sit on the floor with their legs extended. Now if I was to sit like this for a while, I would be in pain. So the intention when we sit is to be on the front edge of the sit bones, like this. So that motion, unfortunately for some, is not available to everybody. But there's a way you can create that mobility by using props. So you would take a blanket or two, and then if you sit up on some height, you get a little bit more mobility so that your spine can lengthen and your breath can flow and your organs can be happier. So one of the things that often happens is people who have trouble sitting on the floor often have trouble with standing forward bends. So standing forward bends are commonly taught in yoga, and if you have difficulty sitting on the floor, they're going to be very challenging to just stand up and come forward without hurting the lower back. Because what happens when the hamstrings and hips are tight, but we wind up rounding, and if you can see, what's happening is I'm rounding into my lower back, putting a lot of pressure there. What we ultimately want to do when we come into these forward bends is to hinge. So maybe calling it a forward hinge or a forward fold is better than a bend, where you're hinging in such a way that you almost feel that your hip sockets lift up and over your thigh bones so that you fold forward, and then you get to a point where your lower back stays long, and then eventually your upper and mid back round forward, so you come into the forward fold. To come up, keep the sacrum firm to come up. So that works if you have that ability to hinge. Not everyone does. Some people wind up coming and winding up like this and wondering why their back still hurts if they've done yoga. So there's a few things to do in that situation. One is to do all sorts of hip openers on the floor, which will be available in other videos. But another thing is to use a chair. And if you take a chair or a ledge or any piece of furniture that you can find, and you bring your hands onto the chair, so instead of bending forward from the waist, you walk your feet backwards and start with your knees bent. And then you'll have that hinge. It's just like using a blanket. You're using a little lift to get that hinge, and then you can play with straightening your legs. Maybe they'll straighten, maybe they won't. And some of you may have noticed, I just caught myself, some of us have a little too much flexibility in those lower front ribs, and we tend to sink towards the floor like this. So that's another thing, to encourage the lower front ribs to stay lifted as you get the length and you move towards straightening the legs, and at some point you might feel like, ooh, that's a little challenging. All right, and then you can take a step forward to come up, and your back might feel nice and elongated. Right. So sometimes in Oakland Yoga Studio, it's really amazing because props magically appear when you need them and disappear when you don't. So now we have two blocks, and then we no longer need the chair for the next thing. So another way to practice that standing forward bend is to use blocks or something that's a little lower than a chair. You bring your feet as parallel as feels comfortable. Bring your hands to your hips. Encourage your hip sockets to lift up and over your thigh bones. Keep hinging, hinging, hinging. Watch those lower ribs from coming forward. And then bring your hands onto the blocks. Lengthen your spine forward. And some of you may stay here. This may be plenty. Some of you may begin to go a little bit lower. Right? At some point, if you practice, it then begins to be comfortable for the upper spine, the cervical spine, and the mid spine to round forward to come into a forward fold. And again, to come up, you can come up with your knees straight or your knees bent. Bring your hands to your hips. Inhale, come on up. And enjoy. I'm Sandra Razielli. Thanks for watching. You can find out more information about me at raziyoga.com.